feel free just to voice and speak up if you got any questions. But I'll go ahead and get started here. A little bit about myself first, just kind of to give you some what my street cred is to speak on issues like this. Um, for those that aren't familiar with Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, we're a two-state nonprofit. We cover both South and North Carolina. And we're the oldest sustainable agriculture organization in the Southeast. We are basically our vision is we're committed to building a sustainable regional food system that's good for everybody, right? Not just for producers, but good for the environment, good for the consumer, good for the markets. And good for this kind of holistic vision of what agriculture, small and mid-sized agriculture can and should be. And we do that by advocating, educating, and building those sustainable food systems throughout the Carolinas. So, one misconception about a lot of our members is that we're all organic. While we certainly encourage organic and will help people transition to organic, the majority of our members are not organic. So, just wanted to kind of put an asterisk next to that. So, how do we do this? We kind of divide up into several different pots, but the biggest ones here is we've got this could really even be cleaved into two. We've got our on-farm technical assistance programs where we have teams of farm services folks who will come to your farm or to our member farms and help them with writing food safety plans, help them get GAP certified. We help them write conservation plans to unlock NRCS funding. We help them with various food safety, market access, high tunnels. We've got market programs. We ran the farm share and LFPA programs in the Carolinas until very recently, when that funding expired. But then also we do advocacy, which is the side of the shop I work on. So advocacy and policy is really my specialty. Most of our farmers and consumers are too busy farming than to go to Columbia or go to Raleigh or go to DC and speak up for them. So what we do is really go on our farms. We kind of diagnose what their policy issues are, where in government we can make the biggest difference, and then execute those policy solutions, or at least, as Kara can probably vouch, try to. Policy moves at the speed of snails. So the long game, as they say. So how do we do that? So we have experience doing advocacy, not just at the local and state level, but also the federal level. So we've been engaging in work on the Farm Bill. We work with our congressional delegations. We develop policy platforms and execute based on that. And all of this is based on our member feedback. So, right, what are our producers hearing? The needs of producers are very different now than they were, say, during the peak of COVID or even pre-COVID. Um, but not only do we have a small policy team, it's myself and two other full-time staffers. So what we try to do is train farmers in their communities on how to be their best advocates for their issues, right? We know what issues we work on and what our producers want, but really we try to train the trainers, right? We want to encourage people to be their own advocate in the halls of power, whether it's elected officials, administrative agencies, or otherwise, so that you can speak up and be better advocates on your issues that matter to you. So let's just get straight into it. I know we're on a kind of a limited timeline here. So Kara, this next few slides are new. We've added these to the last few map programs because we want to give people some opportunity to kind of think big picture on some of this stuff. But for those that want to participate, this is the question that's asked in every single political science 101 course. But what is politics in general? Derek, Crystal, Kara, you got any hunches on where we go with what the definition of politics is?
Well, I would say that politics is kind of the overarching umbrella and relationships between law, policymakers, rule makers, the the average citizen on the street,
Yeah.
and how
And
all of that
money.
fits together.
And
And
money.
money, Derek
Money.
says. I'll kind of simplify that a little bit because Kara is the closest one, unsurprisingly, of all the times we've taught this. Kara is the closest one yet, but because politics is not about um, making the world or your community a better place. It's not. Politics is not about the common good. Politics is not about um, trying to improve your business or the lives of your friends or your family. Those all might be your motivations for engaging in politics, but that's not what politics is. All politics is the adjudication of power, which is a simplified version of what Kara said and Derek said. It's who rules whom? What are the governing dynamics between people? That's it. And politics is not just governed in state houses. It's with your boss when you're negotiating for a pay raise. It's at a car dealership when you're haggling for a deal on a car. Politics is all about the governing dynamics between people, institutions. That's it. Um, and as we've kind of like to delineate for people, there's two paths to power, wielding power, as they say. The first is the direct personal path. This is the path of the elected official who's going to run for office for holding the reins of what power they can. That's the path of dictators and despots around the world. You know, people who seize power. You know, the winners take the losers' stuff. I mean, we're lucky that we've got a messy political system here that usually works through checks and balances. But the direct personal path to power is if you're trying to engage in politics, that's the fun one, right? That's the one where you get courted and wined and dined. Um, if there's money in it, I'm definitely not in the direct personal path because I'm not seeing it in the nonprofit world. Which brings us to the second one, the indirect path to power. The indirect path to power is the one where you're controlling the environment of the people who are on the direct personal path to power, controlling the world they operate in. Politicians react on political pain versus political pleasure, right? When you talk about political pain and pleasure, what does that mean? So political pain, or I'll say political pleasure, that's donations, right? That's endorsements, that's positive press. And then for political pain, just take the inverse of that. It's withheld donations or donations to their opponent. It's bad press, withheld endorsements or endorsements for your opponent. Um, which brings us to why do you even bother with any of this in the first place? Politics is messy, it's exhausting, it leads to burnout. No one enjoys engaging in politics unless you're a freak like me who's, over at the state house as a lobbyist. The reason you should engage in advocacy as a farmer, as a farm worker, as a consumer, is that if you do not engage in advocacy or engage in politics, laws will be written and regulations enforced by people who do not have your best interests at heart. That's it. So you owe it to yourself to get involved. You owe it to your philosophy to learn how to win and to do this. Um, and I do want to mention one misconception a lot of people have is a former employer of mine always talked about the Sir Galahad theory of politics, which is that I will win because my heart is pure. I will win because I'm doing the right thing, and therefore truth and justice and virtue follows me. And given enough time, the moral arc of the universe will bend towards justice, and we'll get it done. That's not always the case. You will win because you show up and you know what you're doing. Success is determined by which side has the most activists and who can do the most effective work. This is just, I'm not going to go through all these, but this is just a smattering of areas where advocacy is needed when it comes to agriculture. I mean, access to USDA grants just don't write themselves. This costs money, which means we need advocates for these programs. Clemson extension funding, research funding. Clemson's the biggest organic certifier, really one of the only ones in South Carolina. They need funding to do their work. Meat processing infrastructure to help free up bottlenecks. Tax incentives, ag exemptions, right to farm laws. All of these require people stepping up and demanding change in the agriculture space. Food safety requirements. We always talk about educating before you regulate. That doesn't happen by default. The government wants to regulate. When we talk about, CFSA is in favor of obviously food safety and food safety regulations, but responsibly done. Size restrictions, exemptions for small farms, things like that. All of this is where advocacy is needed. So I'm going to breeze over this a little bit just to keep us on track for time. One thing that we want to highlight is kind of what's going on in South Carolina right now that requires a framing for any type of advocacy work when it comes to agriculture. Number one, it's a bright red state, a deep red state. If you go to the state house, while there are some Democrats there, it's overwhelmingly a red state, which means that most of the framing is going to be done in terms of spending levels and government size. There's been disputes within the House Freedom Caucus and kind of holding up things. And, we're in a state where Democrats and Republicans still more or less respect each other just from a political virtue standpoint. I mention all this to say that contentious kind of culture war-y legislation tends to be the one that gets to the top of the pile in the schedule. It's not that the legislature dislikes farmers or doesn't want to take up agriculture, but when it comes to floor time, most of the big kind of news headline grabby bills are what's going to populate and dominate most of the time on the floor. Roadside farm regulations aren't that sexy. Um, you know, uh, Support for expanded right to farm or updated right to farm laws, that's not going to get a lot of time because it's not that exciting. I do want to say, though, real quick, as a fun aside for people who are actually interested in politics, I say here there's been no Democrat elected to statewide office since '98. I've got a big fat asterisk next to that. Does anybody know what the exception is to that rule? Who the one Democrat that was elected to statewide office is? It was Jim Rex, Superintendent of Education back in 2008. But beyond Jim Rex, Jim Hodges was the last one for statewide elected office. We're also fortunate down here in South Carolina because we've got a bipartisan green ethic. Farmers have a lot of respect and a lot of capital, and they can walk into any office, Republican or Democrat, and get an audience. Um, you know, down here in South Carolina, unlike some places in North Carolina, South Carolina's got the aspect of when it comes to environmentalism. Democrats are in favor of environmental funding and regulations and things like that from just a basic left-leaning perspective. And conservatives are in favor of environmental regulations from a naturalistic perspective. You got a lot of like Teddy Roosevelt style conservationists down here on the right who I live here, I hunt here, I fish here, I want to protect our natural resources, tourism, things like that. So you get this kind of bipartisan opposition to things like offshore drilling. They don't want infrastructure in Myrtle Beach to bring in all this stuff. Renewable energy is still a little foggy, but the reason I bring this up, framing is everything. It's all about how you tell your story as a farmer to that captive audience. And then last but not least, South Carolina is exploding in population size. Anybody who lives in the Greenville, Spartanburg area, Charleston, Berkeley, Dorchester area, even Rock Hill, Fort Mill, Charlotte knows that we're getting boxed out. Farmland's disappearing at a record level. And if you ask anybody at the Department of Commerce or anybody else, like or PRT or like I used to work at Commerce, they say that it's a good thing. It's just total explosion in capital investment and jobs. But the downside is it's not a good thing if you're a small farmer getting boxed out by residential or commercial developments. So that is kind of the tension at the State House right now, is they want that expanded growth, but they also ostensibly want to protect farmers. So how do you frame that? Um, I'll pause right there just for a second. Does anybody have any questions so far?
I do not.
Okay. Luckily, this is being recorded, so you can go back and, like I said, don't feel like you have to frantically take notes. I'm just kind of hitting you the high level stuff here. So, we've got a section here on strategic storytelling. We're doing this in reverse order, Kara, because when it comes to strategic storytelling, you know, as I mentioned, politicians will rarely do the right thing, and they'll rarely do the right thing for the right reason. But what you want to do is tug on the heartstrings a little bit. You want to personalize your farm, and when you're coming up with how you want to tell the story of your farm in an advocacy perspective, you want to start with who is my audience? Who are you telling the story to? Is it an elected official, someone who has to answer to voters? Is it a bureaucrat in DNR? Is it a bureaucrat in SCDA? Is it a potential funder or a sponsor for a farm event you're wanting to do? Are you trying to get money from these folks? Or is it a community leader that you're trying to partner with? Or tell them get out of the way on an issue that you're trying to support? And then what is it that you need them to do? What's the action item? Do you need them to vote for something, vote against something? Are you asking for increased spending for a program that you utilize or take advantage of? Or is it just a general, you need them to get involved? Do you want them to come help you tell your story? So that's how you really want to frame this from the beginning. Who is your audience? What do you need them to do? Everything else follows from that. The Pixar formula is one thing we like to point people towards, where all the best-selling kids, and I've got 3-year-old twins, all we do is watch Pixar movies. Wall-E, Toy Story, all of it. All of those movies follow the same formula. Once upon a time, there was something. Routine, everything was happening the same way until one day something changed. And because of that, something happened. Because of that, something else happened until finally this. You could apply that to a farm. Once upon a time, I'm a farmer. I have a 16-acre farm doing X, Y, and Z. We've done this for a long time, stayed in the family. We're a century farm until one day a bureaucrat showed up saying that we needed a permit to do X, Y, and Z. Because of that, I can't sell my product to a larger audience. Because of that, we might have to close our doors until finally we find representatives who would help us change the law. It's keep it very short and sweet. And then there's 5 good questions that any good story will frame itself within. Who's the story about? Is it a farmer? Is it a community? What is it you want? Is it to stay profitable? Is it to sell to a larger audience? Stay in business? What's keeping you from doing that? And then how are you going to respond, right? Is it how are you trying to get involved? Are you trying to marshal support, get funding? And then what does that mean in the bigger picture, right? It's usually not just your farm facing this issue. It's usually a neighborhood, a type of farm, farming in South Carolina in general. I mean, the average age of a farmer in South Carolina right now is 61 years old. For every two that retire, only one starts farming. I mean, you're part of a bigger problem that needs to be framed here. And then when it comes to telling your story, again, the audience should see themselves in your story and mutual benefit. Even if an elected official is not going to do things exactly how you need them to and for why you want it to, they get good publicity out of this. They get to issue a press release. They get to take credit for it. It's selfish, it's cynical, but if it gets them across the finish line to vote for you, that's all that matters. Drop the jargon. No elected official or bureaucrat wants to hear about how you're struggling with equip funding through NRCS because you can't quite meet the FSOP standards for X. Drop all the acronyms, drop the jargon, keep it simple, and then practice telling your story to a trusted friend or a confidant. Just so you get kind of those, unless you've done this a lot, like Kara or some others have had, you want to kind of just drop the nerves, get very conversational with it, and then again, make that ask very specific and very clear. What is it you need them to do? You're not there just to rant about a problem. Rant a little bit, sure, it feels better, it's cathartic, but you need to have a tangible ask that they can help you with. Otherwise, what's the point? And that's not to say that relationship building doesn't have a place in terms of just sharing your story. Um, but that can be an end in and of itself too. You're getting to know these folks so that in the future, when you need them, you can call on them and they've already know who you are. Um, Really quickly here, going to go through some of these. You can divide advocacy into two main types. There's grass tops advocacy and there's grassroots advocacy. Everybody's heard of grassroots advocacy, but when it comes to grass tops, they're probably a little bit blurrier. This is the best way to describe it. I see Kara there. Um, Grassroots advocacy is usually what you think of. We got a few examples coming up here, but this is where you're really mobilizing lots of people to do one specific thing. Have all your people call a politician or elected official and tell them to vote yes or vote no. You're going for quantity, not quality. Um, and like I said here, it's usually binary. You're not going for nuance. If you have 150 people calling, you're not having them all tell their specific story. You're tallying numbers of people calling an elected official. Vote no on this budget. Vote yes on the farm bill. All that can be directly contrasted with the other side of that coin, which is grass tops advocacy, where you're trying to build that relationship with a lawmaker and you can, or an administrative official, and you can really go more in depth and into more nuance on what the policy is that needs to change. It doesn't have to be binary. Right? It can be, let me tell you about the changes that need to happen to this law. This is what happens when you meet with like a representative Haddon or somebody else, and they really get to know the nuance of a bill or a law or what needs to happen. This is where you'll get to know your elected official more. What drives them? Why are they doing what they want to do? What boards do they serve on? What experience do they have? And it tends to be slower because you're not just brute force calling someone's phone, but it has more precise results. You can get a greater variety of change from that instead of a grassroots effort. Um, I just touched on this a little bit. This is good for a phone call or an email campaign. Who are you? Where are you based? Where is your farm based? What is it you need the elected official to do? When is the vote? When is it coming up for consideration? Why are you calling? How does this affect you? Um, Again, quantity over quality. Have a talking points, have a script set up so you're not just winging this. But you're targeting legislators. It's even more fun when you're targeting bureaucrats. It usually doesn't happen as often, but it still helps quite a lot. Stakeholder amplification. This is one where, I mean, I know Chalmers is on this call. This is one where you're helping people sign on to like Farm Bureau letters in favor or against something. You're getting people to sign on and present petitions to city councils. Um, I call them fellow traveler organizations. CFSA, we work with SEDA, we work with Farm Bureau, Palmetto Agribusiness Council, all these different folks. We can all have sign-on letters and support and boost each other's messages because it provides cover, right? If you can have a bunch of constituencies all in favor of something or opposed to something, it gives that elected official cover to say, well, of course, I'll vote against this because I know I've got a group who will come up to bat and defend me. Um, And again, it's just representative, it's symptomatic of a broader social consensus. And the last one here we'll highlight for grassroots are my favorite, which is community events, right? Having an organized farm tour. The Ag and Art Tour is a great example of this in South Carolina. You're able to really illustrate the impact that community farms have. We're don't just have it as a flash in the pan for consumers. Invite the media out, invite representatives and staff out. Um, One thing CFSA is doing later on this fall is a candidate forum where you invite everybody who's running for ag commissioner or for local state house out and pose them critical questions and say, what are you going to do to defend funding for X issue or to stop Y thing from happening? And it doesn't happen as much anymore, but we've done film screenings in the past where you've got big documentaries like Biggest Little Farm, the old school from like 2007 was Food Inc. That was a big one. Kiss the Ground, Woody Harrelson's speciality. And then have panel discussions afterwards where you're engaging the community to talk about what they just saw. Those are always fun too. Transitioning now over a little bit into grass tops advocacy. This one, again, good for personal one-on-one contact. This is where really my favorite because you get a chance to. This is basically the schmooze slide where you're sitting down with a representative or a senator, an administrative staffer, and you're just telling your story. Sometimes this is a 30-second elevator pitch. Sometimes you got a 30 minutes to an hour just to talk about what your issue is. Um, and this one is really important because it humanizes the issue, right? It's one thing when you have 100 people calling a staffer and telling them vote no on something. It's another when you get to sit down with a senator or representative and say, here's my problem, here's what's going on, here's how you can help. Um, and it's great too, right? You get to take a photo with them afterwards and post it on social and talk about how you're getting to know these people. And it goes both ways. It looks good for the elected official. This is all just trying to humanize these issues and really just get to know them a little bit better. And for anybody who's never engaged in that, it can be really daunting at first, right? It's one thing to have a staffer on the line and you just have 20 seconds with them to rant and then you hang up the phone and go about your day. But it's another when you like put on a suit and you go and you drive to the state capitol and you meet with somebody. So you want to do your homework, right? You want to research who they are. Are they on the ag committee? Are they on the appropriations committee? Have they served on the board of like Kraft Foods or Monsanto, just to know who you're going up with? Are they who have they endorsed in the past? And then also a big one here that people overlook is right action at the right time, right? You don't want to go and sit down with the chair of the House Ag Committee the first week of May, hoping to get something done in South Carolina when the legislature adjourns in second week of May, right? You really want to time it with the legislative cycle, and make sure that it has the budget already been considered. Most of these state agents, we're working with SEDA on next year's budget already, right? That's 2027. So it's never too soon to do that, but you just want to make sure you know what the time frame is. And then I can't hammer this home enough. Number three, have your action item. Do you need them to co-sponsor a bill? Do you need them to draft legislation? Are you calling in a favor to say positive things about your bill to somebody else who's hesitant on it? Again, you want that shared value with your target. Present the problem. How can they help? And then present the clear ask. And this last one is really important if you're going with other people. Oftentimes, we'll have 4 or 5 people in a meeting with an elected official. Know who's going to be hitting what talking points so that you're not duplicating efforts, you're not speaking over each other, and you're able to present this kind of coordinated, cohesive message. Not going to go too in depth in this, other than just to say, this because this is mainly a federal issue. Um, the cool thing about state issues versus federal issues is that you usually get to meet with the member themselves in South Carolina. It's not unusual to meet with a state rep or a state senator one-on-one here. You're not going to be able to call up Tim Scott's office and meet with Tim Scott or a Lindsey Graham. I mean, once you develop a relationship, maybe, but you're going to be meeting with a staffer 9 times out of 10 at the federal level. Um, and this last point I'll really hit home on because it's one that helps me sometimes. It can be intimidating to meet with elected officials or to even just to meet with staff. Chill out. They are there ostensibly to help. You're there to help them do their job, right? You're there to inform them on the issues, let them know what's going on in the communities, and you're going to brief them on what they can do to help. Um, this can go with at any level of government. This is a photo of all of us meeting with Representative Rouser's office last year in North Carolina. Um, this goes right back to the Pixar formula we talked about earlier. Who are you? Why are you here? What programs are you there to help and talk about? How does it help not just you, but the broader community? And then get their pulse, figure out how they feel about the program. What can you do to get them across the finish line? One pagers are helpful, just so you're not just having you don't, your goal here is not to have a flash in the pan meeting. This is the first step in a relationship that you're building with an office so that you can come back. Eventually, you'll get to the point where, Kara, I know you do this too. You'll be able to just text up at the state level. You're texting representatives and senators about what's going on. Haddon texts me occasionally about stuff and meat processing issues. So it's really good to it's a boost in confidence to be able to get that local connection with elected officials. And then after the meeting, always send a thank you. Always follow up with them. Again, easy just to put it out of mind, but you want to just stay on top of them so you can grow that. And this is the last section here, but we got some good help because when I talked to Derek on the phone, um, sounds like some of the issues that y'all are having, at least in the upstate, is local issues, city and county folks who are being a little aggressive, contentious, and I'll say capricious, just kind of random about how they want to enforce what rules. So zoning
Indeed.
boards, oh, go ahead, Derek.
I said indeed.
Yeah, yeah. Because honestly, I like elected officials more because they have to answer to people ostensibly. So bureaucrats who are unelected, sometimes not. Um, Zoning boards, I had to go before the Richland County Board of Zoning Appeals about my house, and I'm not even a farmer, so I can't imagine what's going on with farmers. But when you've got an inspector or an assessor or a zoning official coming in, you want to speak their language, right? Permitted use is the magic phrase for 9 times out of 10. If you're able to farm on your farm, uh, you're going to be able to really smack them down pretty easily. And I say smack them down, that directly contradicts what I've got in point number three about keeping emotion out of it. But you're not asking for a favor. You're asking them to honor the law, right? You're not trying to beg a bureaucrat to help you. You're trying to stand up for yourself. Always take notes on who you spoke to and when, time and date it. Just because you spoke to somebody on the phone at the front office and they said it was fine, quote unquote, that's not going to fly when you've got a zoning appeal meeting. You want to make sure you got notes on everybody and everything. Um, Keep emotion out of it. These people, because they're bureaucrats, they're probably not making that much money. They're probably just trying to get through the day. Um, don't be overly antagonistic, right? If you got to go at them in a hearing, you don't want them to know going into it that you're going to be antagonistic. If anything, you want to kind of coast along at periscope depth, doing the best you can until it's time to drop the hammer at the meeting with everything you've got lined up, right? Because if you sound the siren too soon and set their alarms off, they're going to come at you hard. So it's best to kind of catch them off guard if you have to. And then the last one is probably the easiest. Leverage state support, right? South Carolina has a pretty strong, one of the strongest right to farm laws in the country. So do some research on that. Work with CFSA, work with Farm Bureau. Local zoning usually is usurped by provisions within the Right to Farm Act. My edit didn't get saved here, but I was going to say check with fellow organizations in the community. Do you have a local ag advisory council? Check with them just to make sure everybody's got all their ducks in a row, and then just lean on that state legislation to carry you across the finish line for preemption.
And Matt, when you drop off, I've got some slides that cover right to farm laws, agritourism liability laws, and a few other things that I'll share with them.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I know I just kind of breezed over it here, but that could be its own presentation. And it sounds like Kara's got some stuff here too. The last thing I'll say about a couple other options is for people who don't, not everybody wants to run for Congress, for God's sake. Not everybody wants to run for ag commissioner, but there are ways that you can get your feet wet with getting involved in local government as a farmer that doesn't take a lot of your time, but is a great way to get sympathetic and friendly people installed at the local level. One is running for soil and water conservation boards, right? People overlook a lot of these folks. That your entry level to getting involved in government doesn't have to be a statewide office or city council. You can get appointed to some of these boards without even having to run or pay a dime on a campaign. Soil and water boards, they administer a lot of these farm bill conservation programs. They're the first point of contact after natural disasters like hurricanes and late freezes. Um, and they respond to projects that are coming in. So when Commerce announces that they're going to put a new spec building in that's 700,000 square feet in a watershed, who's one of the groups that comes in opposition to it? It's the Soil and Water Conservation Boards. So it's really helpful to just look to see where some of these openings are. You're not going to run opposed with anybody 9 times out of 10. And if you don't want to do that, just explore getting involved with your county FSA committees. That doesn't necessarily jump out as something that's exciting, but FSA administers and comes up with the calculations for crop insurance, credit, conservation, any disaster emergency assistance programs like Helene Relief. That all is filtered through FSA. And every county FSA office in the country is required to have a committee that's made up of local stakeholders from their community. That means you, that means farmers. And a lot of these positions are just right for the taking. So if you're on FSA county committee, you're looking at serving a 3-year term. Each committee has between 3 and 11 members. Not all of those are going to be farmers, but many of them are. So if you're interested at all in trying to run for FSA committees, reach out to me. We can help you get squared away with what it takes to figure out when the next election is going to happen. And then some other things that might not pop out to you immediately that would be helpful, but I mean, there's plenty of other boards and commissions to explore. Local parks and recreation councils and boards and committees. What better way than to organize community agritourism events than to insert farmers on local parks and rec committees? Cooperative extension advisory committees. Clemson's got lots of councils and committees. Again, we've got greenways, sustainability councils. All of these are providing input to the halls of power about what the community wants in terms of agriculture, in terms of agritourism, and not to mention local economic development committees. So all the way down to city and counties will have economic development councils who provide input on incentives, tax incentives and otherwise, fee and lieu agreements. Lots of those groups have public seats that you just have to apply to be on if there's an opening. And it can really help you chart the direction that your community is going to go in. You know, if you think back to one of the first slides I had about the growth in South Carolina, that growth isn't an accident. That's policy, right? Very few things happen. That doesn't just happen like an earthquake or a hurricane, right? There has been a collective decision in South Carolina to invite and encourage increased growth and development, often at the collateral damage view of taking out farmland. That doesn't have to be that way, right? You can get involved with these local committees to really kind of dictate the direction that you want your community to go in. That's all I've got for my presentation right now. I know that was so much crammed into so short a period of time. Normally we've got like a 9-hour long program where we unpack a lot of this. But it is really helpful to kind of at least lay the foundation for how to start getting involved and getting your feet wet with politics and advocacy as a farmer.
Well, we thank you very much. I know that I've learned a ton just sitting here watching. And so we'll share this and keep churning.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? I know I hit you with so much, but does anybody have any questions or even experience? Has anybody here done any, I know, Kara, I know you obviously have, but has anybody here done any advocacy or outreach to elected officials or administrative officials?
I have not. So
Okay.
that's why I wanted to talk to you and Kara and get some input.
Good. Well, I do want to say, though, open invitation to reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat here. If you've got any questions about how to get involved, or if you've got an issue that you need to be raised before any agency or elected official in South Carolina, please reach out to myself. Chalmers, I know Chalmers is on this call for the Farm Bureau. We're over at the State House all the time. I'm there almost every week. I'm in DC 3 or 4 times a year. So let us know. We're constantly doing fact finding, trying to figure out what the needs are of South Carolina growers and producers, so that we can better kind of amplify those issues. So just let us know.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hey, Derek, just to chime in what he was saying, I've just been elected to be on my Beaufort and Jasper County FSA Advisory Committee.
Yeah, that's excellent, Tony.
Great, Tony.
Veteran farmers leading the way.
That's right. Carrie, you wanted some slides you wanted
Yeah,
to share?
I've got some slides since we have a few minutes left. We'll pull it up. We'll skip through those. So, even before the meeting started, Crystal and I were talking about kind of that growth and development. And that's what is really causing, and Matt talked about it too, what's really causing a lot of the problems that we're seeing when it comes to agritourism specifically. And so most of the problems we see are not from the State House. The problems that we see are from county councils, city councils, those types of things that are trying to rein in some of these agritourism things. Primarily, I think a lot of it is because they just don't understand what agritourism is. And then they're really trying to support development. So some of the things that we're seeing, I know that short-term rental restrictions are becoming problematic in certain counties, particularly around Charleston, Greenville, Lancaster. And then it's things like there's some folks here in Anderson who just opened up a farm store on their property, that 30-acre parcel of property that has been in cows forever, is considered ag land. But because their farm store is real pretty, even though it is a certified roadside stand through the SCDA, they're having a lot of problems with the county requiring permits or wanting to tax it as a commercial enterprise. All of these things are happening across the state. We have a lot of compatibility issues with neighbors complaining, and counties trying to do different things to rein some of that in. What we have to remember is that agritourism in South Carolina is agriculture. It is specifically mentioned within our right to farm laws. There's no separate requirements that we have to meet. If you are an agricultural activity, if you are a working farm on something that is zoned correctly, I'm not saying that anybody can go out there in their backyard and do agritourism and say that they're exempt from anything. What I'm saying is, if you are properly zoned and have a working farm that does agritourism, that is agriculture. And so the counties cannot restrict anything that we're explicitly given the right to do within our state laws. And yet that's happening over and over and over again. So what we're really seeing is that people are going to their counties asking to please let us do agritourism. Well, it's not the county's ability to tell you that you can or cannot do that. The state law already protects agritourism. There shouldn't be discretionary approvals. There shouldn't be exemptions that you need to file. There shouldn't be extra permits. You're not asking for special treatment. You're asking that the state laws be followed. And so really, like Matt talked about, it's really that education piece, especially at the county level. What we need to do as members of the South Carolina Agritourism Association is be engaging with these county councils, with the planning department guy. He is probably the one that you want to go to. The county attorney, to talk about how the new law that they're talking about, or a new restriction, or something new that the county is doing, stands in direct contravention to the state law, and why. And what that really looks like, going back again to tell your story, what that really looks like on your farm. How does that impact your farm? How does it impact other farms in the area? And so we talked about, I think Derek sent out some stuff that I pulled together, but these are kind of the 4 pillars of what protect us, so that you can go home and pull these up and read through them. None of them are long. State law is not long. You can kind of read through all of these. And so the right to farm laws, as Matt mentioned, South Carolina has some very robust right to farm laws compared to a lot of other states. State law preempts the entire field of agricultural regulation. County ordinances are not able to preempt anything that is explicitly spelled out in the state law, and our right to farm laws is one of those things. Agritourism is deemed an agricultural use, not a commercial use. It is an ag use, and therefore it is protected under the right to farm laws and agritourism as an agricultural use. Agricultural operations, these are things that are explicitly spelled out, things like roadside markets, new methods and technologies and practices. It's already protected. And then we also have the awesome agritourism liability protection framework, which spells out even a few more things. So these are already codified within state law. So you're not asking the county to change anything. What you're asking them is to ensure that their county regulations are in line with the state regulations. Because if they're not, then any of those county restrictions that are more punitive than the state right to farm laws that the state has not given them are null and void. And we don't want it to go that far. Ideally, we don't all end up having to sue our counties to give us the rights and abilities that we already have in the state law. That's what you're trying to tell them. You're helping them. You're like, let me help you do your job, like Matt just talked about.
Hey, Kara.
Yep.
Can I jump in and ask a question right quick?
Absolutely, Tony.
How does because I was just made aware of an issue last night. I was listening to a planning board committee's meeting regarding using shipping containers as storage bins or so forth on farms. And I really got ticked off because there's some of the members really wanted to restrict or tie hands of farmers to try to have them these buildings be under the guise of the local
Building
inspections.
inspector. Yep.
Right.
Yep. And so that's a great point, Tony. So essentially, when it comes to agricultural accessory buildings, what the state law says is that is covered under your right to farm laws to build agricultural accessory buildings that do not have to meet county code requirements. So the best practice, if you're putting in a permanent building, is to go to your county and say, I am building an agricultural accessory building. You have informed them. You are not asking for building code approval. You are not asking for building code inspection. And that was another thing that they tried to do with the farm store up here, was do a full-blown commercial inspection. And that is not required because what Hannah and Weston built was an ag accessory building. And there are some other things. I know Derek has had some experience with ag accessory buildings and very restrictive Greenville County requirements. Yeah, but the biggest thing is that it does not have to meet building code if it is an agricultural accessory building. Is that good, Tony?
Yeah, that's good. In fact, I will make it my business to get down to see the folks in the planning office and tell them that they need to look at the state law dealing with agriculture before they.
And the planning office, that position can't be overstated in your relationship to the county. That's where a lot of the problems can be resolved earlier. Sometimes they don't. We had some run-ins with the Aiken County Planning Office over kind of a prolonged period of time, and they were trying to exert a little more control over what we were doing than they should have been able to. But the planning office is a great place to start.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So if, like I said before, if agriculture is, if you are in an area where your property is considered agricultural, then the county, cannot, put any more restrictions and regulations than the state law already does. It's not a special exemption. A farm store is not a special exemption. So these are some of the things that are codified specifically within the laws when it comes to agritourism in South Carolina. These are specifically named. However, it also says that this list is non-exhaustive. That means there's other things that you can do that are agritourism. But most of, if you kind of look at this list, it's pretty encompassing. Farm vacations and stays, farm vacations are specifically codified in our state law. That means the short-term rental laws that they're trying to enforce across a number of counties directly contravene our right to farm laws and our state law. And that's how you should frame it. We're not asking for something special just because we're farmers. We're asking for what is already in the state law, and all of the code numbers are there, so you can pull all of these things up as well. And we'll send out this recording. So agricultural operation definitions, this is also from state law, explicitly includes the operation of a roadside market. So all of the signage restrictions, and you can't put up that building right next to the road. If you are legally in the set-off, if you're legally on your property, you can have a roadside stand. It says so in the state law. Agritourism is not a departure from farming. We have a tax assessor up here in the upstate who is very sure that he can define agritourism. After 3 years in a PhD program focused entirely on agritourism, he's a lot better than me because I pretty much know it when I see it, but I couldn't define agritourism any better than the South Carolina state law already does. So the liability protection framework is the other thing. So if counties are there, adding to all of these restrictions, we need these waivers, or you need to do this, or you need to do that, point them back to the liability protection framework that is codified in state law. The only requirement is the warning signage, which we all get for being members of the South Carolina Agritourism Association. I'm not telling you don't go get insurance. Definitely go get insurance. But the requirement from the state is your warning sign. Talks about the warning sign. I've been to, I think, everybody's farm but Crystal's and seen all your signs. So definitely post that warning sign.
Hey, Cara, another thing, when you was mentioning about not getting insurance, or you were advising to go ahead and get it, how it was explained to me is that although the sign covers us, you would have to go through the expense of getting an attorney, and
sure.
that insurance will help you cover your costs with that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So a lot of this is what Matt kind of already talked about, but just with a more agritourism bent to it. So like I said, we're here to help you. You're going to the county to help them, to make sure that they are in compliance with state law. Because the problem is, if they have restrictive regulations, they could be declared null and void at the state level. And if that happens, then what do they do, right? Does that cover other things? And so knowing what your right to farm laws is the most important first step. Clarity reduces conflict. A lot of times the county council members, the planning commission director, they don't necessarily know the second and third order effects of some of these things. Short-term rentals, traffic restrictions, signage, putting up a farm stand. And so talking them through this, telling your story, and then going with the bottom line. Efficient permitting means less appeals. Less appeals means less staff time, less costs. And so it's in the best interest of the county to understand the state law when it comes to agriculture and agritourism. And then bring it home. A lot of these things are happening because South Carolina counties are really pushing growth and development. We're not their tax base in the county. They're not pulling in a lot of tax money from farms and agritourism entities. They are pulling in a lot of tax money from a 800 house development like Crystal was talking about. And so explaining the importance of agriculture to South Carolina, explaining the importance of agritourism to sustaining agriculture in South Carolina. We are the #1 industry. #2 is not even close. Agriculture in South Carolina is almost a $52 billion industry. And so explaining that and explaining how rural tourism can help keep dollars in their county, can increase spending in their county, particularly in those rural counties. And then the farm preservation, like Matt talked about, there's a lot of folks in South Carolina who really like growth, but if you are an elected official in South Carolina, you want to make sure that you are appealing to both the environmental side on the Democrats and the naturalist side on the Republicans. So couching it in that farm preservation is important to our state. If you look at the state law over the last few years, you'll see that farm preservation is important. The Working Lands Conservation Act that Representative Haddon put through and the governor signed, all of these things are really important and they're tangible. Get out there, get them out there, like bring your county commission to your farm, invite them to your farm so that they can see it and see what you do in a real and tangible way. That's the best way to tell your story, is to show them. So, here's some kind of one-liners. But this is rooted in the idea that what is in those right to farm laws, that what's in the agricultural operations definitions and the agritourism liability law and a few other things that we talked about earlier. So agritourism is not new, right? The push for it is probably new. Sort of the definition of agritourism is relatively new, but people have been going to farms forever, right? This isn't something that we should be worrying about. Why are we stopping people from getting closer to their food? Why are we stopping people from visiting farms and learning and education? And leading with that story is really important. And so you want to go to those counties and say, hey, let's sit down and talk about what agritourism looks like in this county and how the county council can best support it. And I think that's basically it. Know the law, speak the message, and build the coalition. So it's all the things that Matt really talked about earlier, using that messaging. This is already the law, right? That's all you have to really start with, is this is already in state law. Now let's sit down together at the county and figure out how we can best support the county, support the farmers, and make sure that we are in league with what state law says so that we don't run into problems with null and void regulations in the future that might have second and third order impacts. So
that's kind of what we're trying to push from the Advocacy Committee perspective, is that, local county level people reading the regulations advising the county commissioners and the county zoning board that, I mean, I've got a meeting probably, I think it's in 2 weeks with the county zoning board, scared to death. I have never done this before, but I will prevail because, you know, we're armed with, this is the right to farm. So
Yep.
we're just up against the wall here in a lot of, particularly in Greenville County. I don't know about other counties, but Greenville County is kind of
Yep.
like the premier of, oh, let's bit twiddle with everybody and regulate them to death. So my point here is, as the advocacy chairman, is to let's go and talk to our local folks. We're a small committee right now. Hopefully we can recruit people in each county in South Carolina to do this. However, I realize it might not all happen this year, but we'll keep going at it. So
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, the important thing to remember, when you're going into an advocacy situation, whether it's grassroots or grass tops, any of it, if you are interacting with someone, particularly in the grass tops scenario, lead into your story. And you are a veteran farmer in South Carolina, Derek.
yep, I am.
And so that brings with it a lot of credibility. You're borrowing trust from the farming community. You're borrowing trust from the veteran community. And so leaning into that has been really, really successful for us, especially at that county level, right? Nobody wants to be seen at a county council diminishing the value of a veteran farmer. Nobody wants to be that guy. So we really
hope, you know?
we really lean into our identity. And then, you know, you are helping Greenville County make sure they're in compliance with state law. We're just here to help you.
Exactly.
Is really a great way to frame it, but that's awesome.
Indeed. We want to thank Kara and Matt for taking their time to do this for us. And when we publish this, then please call them up and say thank you, because this is an important issue for us.
Yep, absolutely. And like Matt said, I'm always available. So please
It's always been available to me, Kara.
Oh yes, Derek. I know we text and email several times a day, it seems like. So,
I know. Seems that way anyway. So,
all right. Well,
everybody.
thank you all. And I will get the recording link and get it sent out to you and Laura. So
yep. Thanks so much. And thank you everybody else for attending. And we shall see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.